When I was in Thailand, I arrived to an island and I received a commission for the New York Times. I took it and I started working on it. And suddenly the lights went down and I didn't know what was going on. So I went out of the house. It was the whole electricity of the area was shut down. And then I asked them and they said, yeah, of course, because after 9, there is no electricity in this island because it runs because a generator. I had a SIM card, so I still had internet and I still had 40% of my MacBook battery.
Hey Hatchlings, welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Akins. Today on the podcast, we have nomadic illustrator Magoz. He's worked with some great clients like the New York Times and Scientific American, and he's built most of his career while working on the road. So it's great to talk to him because he gives us some tips and tricks for maintaining a business while traveling full time, and also the pros and cons of having a distinct style versus being more of a generalist. So if you're interested in traveling while working or working remotely, then this one is definitely for you. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Hey Magoz, thanks so much for coming on the show. How are you?
Hey Hayley, thank you very much for inviting me.
So you call yourself a nomadic illustrator. Can you just explain what that means?
Yeah, 4 years ago, I started kind of a nomadic adventure. I was living in Barcelona at that time, and back then starting having commissions and everything. So I was a full-time illustrator, but somehow my personal life wasn't there. I was, very stuck living at my parents' house, and I needed kind of a change. And then I decided to, break up with everything and start a new adventure. So I went to Bristol and started kind of a new life. And since then, I've been traveling all the time, all over the world. And at some point, I started considering myself like a nomadic because not having a permanent residence is sometimes tricky, but interesting lifestyle.
So does that mean that you kind of spend maybe like a month in one country and work there and then maybe move on, or, how does that work for you?
Yeah, sometimes it's just a few days, sometimes it's a few weeks, and sometimes I even spend like a few months in places. Recently, for example, in Helsinki. But it very depends on the mood and the state of my work and my life. I decide to spend more time or less.
Okay, yeah, it's pretty crazy. So you have all your equipment and everything. Is like everything you own, or do you have like a storage space somewhere with your stuff in it? Or
yeah, I try to live in a very minimalistic way. So I have everything with me. But then I also have my dad's house where I have all my books because I've been buying and collecting books, and that's pretty much what I have somewhere that is not kind of my responsibility, or in other words, is not my house. But I try to pretty much travel light as much as I can, and I also simplified a lot my gear, my computer, my tablet, everything fits in my backpack.
Okay, yeah, because you have to carry everything around with you. So I guess, you need to have light, kind of easy portable.
Yeah,
kind of
that's
stuff.
Very important when you travel, yeah.
Do you find it difficult, like if you're just working on a laptop, sometimes do you wish you had a big monitor or things like that with you?
No, sometimes it's more about, for example, if I want to, do painting or other activity that I'm not used to, I can't, because every decision it has implications in the future, because I can't basically buy just a big canvas and colors and paint and what I'm going to do with all this stuff in a few days. So I would say that it's not affecting my actual work, but it affects dramatically my possibilities in other, activities. But I don't know, I suppose at some point when I feel that this becomes like a major problem, I will just settle down or I will stay longer in places.
Okay, so do you think, because you have quite a distinct style as like an illustrator, do you think that's informed by like how you have to just work in Photoshop or because you're traveling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think somehow it affected this kind of minimalistic life. But I started having this style and this kind of work before I left. So I've been improving it. And for example, before I started with animations, I was working in Photoshop, but then I switched to Illustrator because it was a nightmare to animate my images using pixels. So it's like a long process. And right now I'm very happy with all the setup and the workflow, because I can just work pretty much everywhere. And yeah, everything right now is quite established.
Okay, so before you started traveling, like how long were you working as an illustrator?
I would say maybe a couple of years, getting money from it. But before that, I was obviously doing other projects, also as an illustrator. But at that point, I wasn't earning enough to sustain my life. So I would say 4 years before I started traveling, I started being an illustrator. Then 2 years before, I got some regular income. And then 4 years ago, I just started traveling.
Okay, so you've been doing it maybe for about 10 years.
Yeah, 8, 9 years, something around
Okay.
that.
So you said it was quite hard at the beginning. You weren't really earning a lot of money.
Yeah, because I studied in illustration school, but I think it was more about drawing than illustration. And then I had to find my own way and to find commissions and clients and even understanding what illustration was. So it was like a long journey where I learned a lot. And finally, I just got some commissions and the wheel started rolling.
So you have like some quite big clients like the New York Times. Can you tell us a bit about how you get your clients?
Some of those clients, I started working with them when I was represented by an agency. And that was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But last year, I decided that I wanted to continue on my own because I was getting already many requests and many commissions. I wanted to simplify everything and, depend on myself and see if I could keep the assignments as I was doing with an agency, but on my own. So many of those clients, I got them because an agency, but in this last year, I've been doing on my own and I also get some clients. And I think at some point is when you get like a solid work and you work regularly and you post in the internet, somehow clients get interested in your work and then they call you or they send you an email saying, oh, we have this project, we would like to work with you. That's how it went for myself.
So if you're starting out, is it easier to try and get an agent, or do you think it's easier to kind of just contact clients directly for work?
I think what is the most important is to have something to say and your own way of saying it. And then when your work is good, it's easier to get attention. And it might be by an agency or directly contacting clients. I think both options are good. And I think both options are compatible. But I think the most important is producing good work and something that is, interesting.
Yeah. So did you kind of develop your own style and then you found that you got more clients?
Yes, I invested all my time at the beginning on finding myself and finding a way that I felt comfortable working and something that somehow I felt that it was my voice. And then when I was ready, I just started contacting clients and agencies. But I did that in like 2 or 3 years, creating personal projects and investing time on my images. So it took me a while until I found my voice.
So did you just email clients, kind of like cold emailing, or did you try and like find people through your network? Like how did you manage that?
Yeah, it was first, it was just contacting them and trying to find some answers. And it was at some point, I was very I don't want to say disappointed, but, a bit adapting about everything, because I sent like 50 emails or 100 and the responses were very low. But some of them were interested and I got my first assignments in that way. And even my agency back then, I got them using the same approach, just contacting people that I thought that I could fit in their style or in their needs. And yeah, that's how it was.
So you have your blog and your newsletter, and some of the blogs have like 20,000 views. Like, why did you start doing the blog?
That was when I was traveling in Asia. And well, I've been always interested in internet, and I learned pretty much everything I know from internet or from other people. At some point I started thinking about giving back, giving everything I learned back, because I don't know, being an illustrator is just being at home or in your studio producing work. There are many things that you can't share, or at least no one shares. And I was thinking that it was kind of a mistake, or at least it was a waste not sharing those, because it took me a while to get some information or to figure out systems. And then if I only kept those for myself, then they were a bit useless, only useful for myself, but not for the others. So that's why I started having an idea of how was the best way to share things and give back to the community. And that was the original intention of the blog. And I think nowadays is still the same. It's just sharing knowledge and trying to help other people as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And definitely, in doing illustration and animation, I think it's nice to share with people about how you work and things like that, especially because you're doing quite a unique thing. I mean, I know the digital nomad movement is kind of getting a lot bigger now, but it's kind of giving people another view and another option that maybe they haven't thought about. And I know you try and share a lot about your process and, how you contact people and things like that on the blog. So I think maybe that's why it's kind of got quite a big response, and that's why I asked you to come on the podcast as well, because I saw that you were talking about these things, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And this is the magic of sharing knowledge, because sometimes in certain articles, I just shared my workflow for something specific. And then someone in the comments just said, hey, there is a better way to do that. And then I just learned, I improved my system just sharing it, because someone was reading it and, the same happened again. They shared it and then I checked that information and it was working better than my own workflow. So sometimes it's amazing how sharing and the power of sharing.
Yeah, and I think like being involved in the community and stuff as well, if we all kind of share what we're doing and things like that, we can empower each other in that way.
Yeah.
I saw that you were developing like an Illustrator Essentials course. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, this has been like a long journey. I started with this project like last year, and the motivations for creating a course, it was because the blog has certain limitations. For example, I know that it's better for the audience to read articles that are, that take in between 4 and 8 minutes. Because when you start reading something that takes 20 minutes, it's not useful and it's so long. It's not the best format to read it as a text. So I had this idea of kind of building a course, sharing everything I knew. That was the original idea. But then after some months of work, and I asked my audience using a questionnaire, what did they want it or what are they struggling with? And I would like a massive response, like 700 people responded to that and gave me a lot of information. And somehow I started thinking, maybe I need to structure the course in a different way. And right now the course is going to be released in the next months. I don't know yet. I'm building all the platform and everything. But right now is a course about building your professional career as an illustrator. And at the end, it's not going to be called Illustrator's Essential. I can't tell you how it's going to be called because I'm still working on it and I don't want to unveil surprises yet. But it has been a long journey and I'm very, very excited because I finally, after doing it from scratch 7 or 8 times, I think I finally found a good way to to share everything I wanted from the beginning and to help other people in a better way than just reading articles.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, we'll put a link to the show notes because I think you can sign up to your newsletter, right? So I guess you'll be like announcing it on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll do that. So have you always worked like remotely with your clients? Because I know that a lot of them are magazines and stuff. So I thought maybe that's easier to kind of get remote work because they're not expecting you to be on site anyway. Is that right?
Yeah, I never worked in a studio in-house or in any kind of commission that required me to go somewhere. I always worked from traveling or being at my home or just remote work. And I think it's how not only illustration industry is going towards, but I think in general, with the internet and all these communication tools and files on the cloud and the apps, everything is so easy. And sometimes it's even more productive to work with other people that are not necessarily in the same space.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it gives you a lot more freedom. Like obviously with you, you're traveling like all around the world. So if you couldn't do your work remotely, you wouldn't be able to do that, would you? So
yeah, exactly. And there is another thing, because I think it's the old system that, you need to go there at 8 and, you have a little time to have lunch and you're free at 5. It doesn't necessarily work in that way for other people. I mean, what if you prefer to have another timetables? And all these topics are kind of like, in my opinion, at least working is going to transition or to move to another system where it's more flexible about location, but also flexible about timetables and schedules. And instead of focusing on working hours or you should be here on time, maybe it's better to focus on goals and the actual work that we do. And so when you do it from where, it doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, definitely. I've spoken to some other people on the podcast about this, about how it's the results that you give, not whether you're sat at a desk from like 9 to 5 or whatever. But
yeah, definitely.
It must be quite difficult, like to try and stay productive while you're traveling. Like say if you're, somewhere where there's a lovely sunny beach or something, like how do you manage that?
Yeah, that's definitely probably the most difficult part of traveling and working at the same time, because you are very tempted to skip work and just, go to that beach or wherever you are. But at the same time, it's kind of, it helps to shape and to practice your responsibility and how organized and how professional you are. And I apply this concept to many things. For example, another thing I like about traveling is that forces you to step out of the comfort zone every day in most of the activities that you have to do. Even a single going to do the laundry is an adventure in a new country because you don't know how it works, you don't know places. So forcing myself into those, let's say, uncomfortable or at least activities that requires me to step out of my comfort zone help a lot to shape my days and keep myself active and don't become lazy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it probably has, it affects you as a person and affects your work as well, I think, because you're constantly kind of expanding as a person because you have...
Yeah, and challenging yourself constantly.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're in a new country all the time, as we know, when we all go traveling, it can be quite testing. So I think it's interesting to try and do that long term. Do you ever see yourself like picking somewhere and more settling down, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. I see myself having a family at some point and definitely not being a nomad anymore. But I think in between those two realities is going to be one where I can settle down somewhere and let's say spend a few months a year traveling, but knowing that I have a place to come back, which is a main difference from just traveling and not having a home at all. So I think this is going to happen in the next years. I don't know when yet, but I already start seeing signs that this next step is going to happen. But another good thing about traveling is that I don't really know where to establish myself. So traveling gives you a lot of input and clues where is the best place to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it helps, it must help with your work because you're not just established like in one city or something like that. You can basically decide to live wherever you want and you'll still be, I assume, making the same money because that's what you've always done. So I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, and another interesting point of traveling, I talk a lot with my friends, is that people think that traveling or being a nomad is very expensive because you are traveling constantly. But sometimes it's the opposite, because let's say that you are on budget, you can go to a country where life is cheaper than your original country or wherever you are. And that also can help you to save some money. So sometimes traveling and being a nomad is a really clever approach to save money.
Yeah, definitely. Because, I'm based in London at the moment and that is basically the most expensive place you can be. So if I was, working anywhere else with my clients, I mean, I'm sure that would be better.
Yeah, exactly. 1 month of rent in London, it gives you like 6 months in other places. And that's a big deal if you're on budget.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've heard a lot of digital nomads working like in Croatia now is kind of a new kind of place. That's what I heard. Yeah,
it's kind of the next Southeast Asia.
Yeah, exactly.
The East Europe.
Well, because it's lovely and sunny and it's quite cheap, isn't it? I've been a few times and it's a very nice place. So I can see why.
Yeah, it is.
Why that would attract people to work there and go to the beach in between, But has there ever been a time when you had a problem with a client because you were working from another country?
Not really. I had to somehow to sort some issues. For example, I remember that time when I was in Thailand, I think, and I arrived to an island and I received a commission for the New York Times. And then I accepted, I took it and I started working on it. And suddenly the lights just went down and I didn't know what was going on. So I went out of the house to check if the neighbors had lights, and no, it was the whole electricity of the area was shut down. And then I asked them, and they said, "Yeah, of course, because after 9 there is no electricity in this island because it runs because a generator." So at that point, I was very happy that I had a SIM card, so I still had internet, and I still had 40% of my MacBook battery. So I somehow had to manage. I knew that was all I had, and this was kind of a challenge. And at the end, everything went well. I just sent the final image and everything. And at the end, when everything was over, I said, "By the way, this is what happens," and I'm happy that that everything turned out well. But I haven't had any issues. But sometimes you need to adapt. You need. Traveling all the time gives you a lot of experience on those situations. And by now, for example, I always travel having a SIM card and having some power banks for to have some extra battery, just because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's so funny that you're like racing against your battery to get this job done.
Exactly. Not only the time, but also the battery.
That's a really good story. I guess you learn next time I need to have extra power and stuff like that. That's so funny.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give someone who wanted to travel while they were freelancing?
First of all, if this person hasn't traveled before, so if it's kind of, I want to try it, I would say to go somewhere close by them. I mean, it might be outside of your country, but somewhere that takes you a few hours to come back if at some point you need it or something happens. But for those who already like traveling, planning, I think is very important. Nowadays, there are many resources and apps and a lot of technology and tips that you can apply to your own trips that are going to have a massive difference in your trips. I wrote a series of articles called Digital Nomad on my blog, and I shared a lot of tips like those, like planning, how to plan it. For example, having a budget is very important as well, especially if you want to do it for a long time. Pretty much is that. Just do your work before leaving. And what I mean by doing your work is just to do some research, have a plan, have a budget, know where you are going, know the cost of living. If you are going somewhere where it's summertime, just don't bring winter clothes. All this kind of stuff that it kind of sounds a bit silly, but honestly, it can happen to you that you didn't plan something or you didn't consider something, and then you face some uncomfortable situation. So I think planning beforehand is great. I would also add to be very flexible when you're working, when you are traveling, because it happened to me many times that I was going somewhere, for example, when I arrived to Asia with a very clear idea of what I wanted. And then the day after of arriving, I had to change all my plans because I saw the reality there, and I saw that my original plan wasn't what I really wanted, and I had to adapt myself. So being flexible and having like an open mind is super, super useful as well.
Yeah, definitely. Do you plan your trips or where you're going to go next quite far in advance, or do you kind of just say, oh, maybe I'll, go over to that country like next month? Or
in my case, it works in a way that I'm traveling with my girlfriend, so we are traveling together, and this obviously is kind of finding a point that we have in common on where to go or how long to go there. But when I travel alone, I do the same, but only is up to myself, so it's easier. I don't think I plan everything in super advance. I would say maybe a month or 2 months if I want to get some cheap flights. Also about the accommodation, also always is better to have it in advance, but it's not a big deal if I do it in a couple of weeks in advance. So no, I don't really plan half a year ahead or 1 year ahead, because this clashes with a flexible mentality.
yeah.
Because maybe I realize that I don't want to go there anymore, and then I have that trip, and yeah.
Oh yeah, so your girlfriend is with you too. So is she a freelancer as well?
She's a musician, and yeah, you can consider that some sort of freelancer. So
okay.
She's giving gigs and also finding other ways to make a living out of her music.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting, because I assumed you'd be on your own, because that obviously is quite hard to find two people who want to do the exact same thing, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, it's difficult. I feel very fortunate.
Did you meet her while you were traveling, or?
Yeah, in Bristol, just after I started my my adventure.
Oh, okay, that's cool. What's your worst experience that you've had while you've been traveling?
I don't have any major problem. Obviously, I had some canceled flights and other delays, but I haven't been sick, for example.
Okay.
Which is great. I don't know. I don't want to be like that everything is perfect, but I haven't had any major things, because when something happened, I always had like a plan B, and I'm always cautious of where I go and where I'm staying and all this. So I haven't had any major problem. For example, one of the, if we can consider problems, this is a story I told you about this New York Times assignment, but ended up well. So
yeah, that's quite funny. It's interesting. So if you could give yourself some advice, like say when you're about a year into your career, what would it be, and kind of what were you doing around that time?
I would say to focus in a global world instead of in the original country, because nowadays everything is global. There's no difference to work for, there are some difference in terms of how much you get for a commission and all this, but the way it works, producing illustrations and animations is the same for a client from the New York or London or Australia is the same. So I think having this global mentality is very important. And also, obviously, for non-English native speakers like me, like myself, learning English as soon as possible is very, very important. You open this global door. That I think is very important. But then practical things, I would say to start building like an online presence from the very beginning. Well, when I mean very beginning, I mean when you start having like a solid portfolio and you really think that you have found more or less your voice, So when you have that, just go all in and start building like a solid online presence and target the global market. I think those two things are probably the most important.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think that people will generally think, oh, maybe it's easier for me to get clients like in my town or wherever. And it's hard, like if you live like in a small town to think, oh, I'm going to try and contact people in London or New York or
Yeah.
So I think that's obviously like a key to working remotely is to try and reach out into the global marketplace. But then I think it can be quite daunting as well for some people. So I don't know whether you have any advice about that or anything you could think of that might help if someone's like, oh, I really would love to work for a company in New York, but how do I do that? And, you know, how do I explain to them that I live in like England in the countryside or something? You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I really understand this feeling that someone can have. But first of all, I would say that working local is great. I mean, if you want to work local and you're able to make a living with that, is great. The only thing I say to work globally is that you have more opportunities to make a living from your work because there are more clients from many places, and maybe you can target places where your work fits better than locally even. From that example that you said, someone who wants to, I don't know, get clients in New York, maybe it's great to build a specific strategy to target those clients and, know how they work, what do they want, what are the conditions, all this in advance. And then maybe it can be even a good option. Especially that's very interesting in the US where they love seeing you and it's very easy to get an opportunity. So maybe it's also a great point to go there if you want to grow in a new market. Maybe just go for a week and plan some meetings, and I'm sure you're going to have some opportunities because that's very common in the US. But also something you said, I don't think it matters where you're from, even if you are in the countryside of nowhere. I don't think clients worry about that anymore.
Yeah, I think that's true as well. But I think, when you start, maybe you think, oh, I have to live in London or in New York or whatever to be able to survive. I know when I started, I moved to London and got a job, and I didn't really know about this whole location independent digital nomad movement, and now I think I've been more informed about that. And also I know a lot of people who live in England but work for clients in New York and the US and stuff. So I think that just kind of opens your mind a bit, whereas when you're a bit younger, maybe people don't tell you about these kind of things, and then so you don't think it's a possibility. So I just think it's a cool thing to talk about, and I know that many people are trying to do more remote work, and I think in illustration it's kind of mostly how things are done. But as a motion designer and animator, I think there's still a lot of agencies that want you to be in-house. So maybe it's about trying to find the people who are happy to work remotely, and maybe I think it's more like direct to client stuff. Like a lot of your stuff is editorial, right? So it's direct to like a magazine. So maybe for animators, it would be good to seek, kind of small, medium businesses and try and contact their marketing departments and stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I think it very depends on how do you want to approach your career. Because the way I do, for example, is more like as an author, that I have a very clear line defined. So pretty much everyone knows what to expect if they want to work with me, because I literally don't do anything else. I just have this, and I have very kind of rules about my own work, what I do and what I don't do. So if you go to this path, I think it doesn't really matter if you do illustration, animation, music, or whatever, because you have your own work. And if someone wants that, they are coming to you, and obviously they are not going to be worried about where you are or if you can go there or not. But on the other hand, there is the other possibility, being in-house, that instead of you defining the rules, they just want someone to feed their rules. And this is completely legit as well. It's another approach for the same profession. And it's fine. I think it's up to everyone to decide which of those to take.
Do you think it's easier because you have like very defined style and like a very particular client to work remotely and kind of do it on your terms than if you say are more a generalist kind of motion designer or something like that?
I'm not sure if it's easier, but it's a completely different system.
Yeah.
Because you are only going to get assignments from people that really want what you do, and you as a person having a name and a style. On the other hand, the other way is easier to maybe to get commissions. I'm not sure if they are going to be in the same conditions, or maybe even they are better. I don't know, because I never tried that. But for me, it's just a matter of focusing on a few things and do them and just be strict with that. And the other way is just saying, okay, I can be flexible and I do this and this and this and this. So it very depends. I think maybe it's not easier. Maybe it's more difficult to go in the path that you are very strict what you do. And obviously it depends on how market consider your own work.
Yeah, I think it's about, it can take longer to develop your own kind of style and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But if you can manage to do that and that's in demand and you know who the type of clients who want that kind of work, then maybe it can be easier, but it takes longer to get there, if that makes sense. That's my impression.
Yeah, because I think this is the point is that you're difficult to replace. I mean, you do something more or less unique, while the other side is you can be replaced easier. But also there is more work and there are more opportunities. And maybe those people that want something made by a person like me or many other people that have very strict rules on their work, maybe I'm closing the doors to many other segments because I'm not as flexible.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like you would like to work in like a different style, or, do you ever try things outside of what you normally do?
Not really. I mean, I always want to evolve as I did. For example, when I started doing animations, that was like 2 years ago. That's an evolution. But I keep something, I change a few things and I adapt to a new media. That's how I consider myself and my future. But I don't think it's a matter of style. It's more about evolving the approach you have towards your own career. And thinking, oh, maybe I would like to do some animation spots, or maybe I would like to do some animated GIFs, and then go for it and trying to keep my essence and just evolving.
So are you doing the animations still for magazines? Is that kind of like online magazines and things?
Yeah, I have to say that when I do the ideas and the original ideas are mine, and I do all the direction and the conceptual everything. But the animations are made by Jose Lorenzo, is my partner. When I met him, we started doing all the animations that you can see in my website. And we work for magazines, but also I think nowadays we work more for advertising agencies, but also to particular clients and also some editorial commissions.
Okay, because I was thinking that as, we kind of have more online magazines and things like that maybe you would get asked more to be able to make your illustrations move.
Yeah, the only problem, I think there is a problem to tackle there is editorial world. Normally, they want illustrations in like few hours, and it's possible to do that. But then when it comes to animation, it becomes a problem because animation takes more time, and animations, you can't change things in the same way that you change things in an illustration. So I think the only editorial work that works well with animations are those that you have a bit more time and they're a bit more open in terms of art direction, and they are not as rigid than other commissions on the same nature, but for an illustrator.
Yeah. Okay. Do you like charge per day, or is it like per illustration and then you charge a usage fee? How does that work?
I only charge for usage. I mean, I don't even have like a hour rate or a daily rate or anything. I just when I receive new commissions, I just send a quote, and this includes the usage, but also the making of the image. Because my work is not really related to how many hours I work. It's more about finding the ideas, and it's impossible for me to predict how long it's going to take one image, because the most important part is the idea. So it becomes impossible. I never tried, and I think it doesn't work for myself.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a different model to working on normally with motion designers and animators. You usually do a day rate, but then I think more and more if people are working remotely, they're trying to do like a sort of a project fee, and then you have a bit more flexibility in that.
Yeah.
So have you learned anything on your journey that you think could help the audience?
I think sharing is very important, because somehow internet is so powerful, and I still believe that internet is that ideas we had in the early 2000s about internet as a place where you can learn and share. And even nowadays, with Twitter and all this rage of people, I think internet is not having the best image of its history. But sharing, I think, is amazing. Sharing your work, sharing your advice, sharing your points. I think it encourages other people and makes small communities that at the end encourages you to keep doing that. So sharing is something that I really recommend to anyone. And then also being brave, because sometimes, and this is related to traveling, but also to pursuing your own career. Sometimes we are very scared of many things, and fear is our worst enemy. And at the end, we are our worst enemy, because we are afraid of the outcome that it can be. But the great things only happen when you step out of that comfort zone and you look at the fear to the eyes and say, okay, I know it's scary, but I'm still going to do it, and I'm 100% on it. So yeah, being brave nowadays is very, very important, because there are a lot of competition and a lot of possible outcomes, and the only way to figure out what's going to happen is actually doing it.
Yeah, definitely. I think sharing what you know is really important to kind of, build us all up, as I said earlier. And this is what we're trying to do with this podcast, is kind of, share information about how people work and people from different backgrounds and how they've kind of got to where they are really. And, I think even just putting your work online sometimes is scary, because you're like, is it any good? You don't really have a good perspective. So I think sharing stuff and just getting used to that side of it as well probably helps a lot, especially when people are starting out.
Yeah, and maybe not paying too much attention to likes and how many subscribers or how many audience you have, because at the end it's just a number, and we don't even know if this is a real number of how many, it's just a thing that we need to deal nowadays with the internet, that it's so easy to get trapped by those numbers and think that those numbers have the power to influence your decision. So I know people that they are, I got so many likes on this one, I should do more of this. I think this is a mistake, because at the end, these likes are the ones that are deciding on your career instead of yourself, and saying, hey, I prefer to do this, even it has less commercial success, or not even commercial success. That's just like Instagram or Twitter success. So I think I will add that on top of the other advices. Just don't pay too much attention to those numbers.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you're kind of, it can maybe be easy to go, this kind of style is popular, I'll try and do something like that because that might get me more likes. But then if you're not bringing your own individuality into something, then maybe you're not going to stand out, because, you make work that looks like your work and nobody else's work, and I think that's obviously what has made you stand out. So maybe it's not kind of following the trend and just doing kind of what's inside yourself, that sounds a bit cheesy, but you know what I mean?
No, completely. Yeah. I'm trying to do all this in my blog as well. So if someone wants to get more in depth of any topics, is very welcome to just ask me directly in the blog or send me an email. Always very up to just chatting with other people.
Yeah, we'll definitely put that in the show notes and everything. Do you just want to tell the audience like where they can find your work and how they can contact you?
Yeah, they can find my work on magoz.is and also on my blog, which is magoz.blog. And the Instagram is probably social network. I'm more active, and I'm starting to try to do some Instagram stories lately. You can find me on instagram.com/magoz. And you can find other ways if you go to my website. But those are the main ones. And probably it's worth telling as well, the newsletter I write nearly every week. I say nearly because there are weeks that I can't. I don't have enough hours, but I try to keep it like weekly. This is my favorite way to connect with the audience because I just tell personal things and things that are not anywhere else. And obviously, I just connect and share my last images, animations, or an article. So it's probably the best way to keep in touch and keep updated of my own movements.
Yeah, definitely. We'll put all the links in the show notes for you and everything. But it was great to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure, Hayley. Thank you very much for inviting me.
That was really great to have Magoz on. He was so interesting to talk to, and it was great to hear about how he works while traveling full time. If you haven't already, if you could do me a massive favor, if you could go to iTunes and give us a rating and review, that would be really helpful because that shows the podcast to more people. And also please do subscribe because we've got some fantastic episodes coming up. If you would like to know more about Motion Hatch, please go to motionhatch.com and sign up for our newsletter. If you do that, we'll add you to the free Facebook community where we're talking about the business side of motion design and animation in there. There's loads of great animators in there already, so the discussions are already happening. So if you're interested in that, please do sign up, and I'll see you soon.